Hi everyone, this is Matthew Janda for CardRunners, and I'm here with Cutoff versus Button versus Blind Play Part 3, where we're going to look at 3-bet pots in position. The goals for this video are going to be to go over a quick review of theory and logic. Then we'll talk about 3-bet pots in position on all streets versus different types of actions. We, of course, can't go over every single possible action, but we'll discuss a variety of different concepts and topics regarding 3-bet pot play. So we're definitely not going to limit ourselves to just analyzing the flop. We're going to go into the turn in the river, and we'll try to note the close and key points in our range. So I'm also not going to list what I would do with every single hand in my range, because that will just take too long. But I want to point out the stuff that I think is really close or really key. Quick theory review. When we call a 3-bet, our range will be worse than the 3-betters. We called because we got a good price pre-flop, usually around 2-1, and have the advantage of position. At least in this example, we have the advantage of position, so we're assuming the 3-bet came from the small blind or the big blind. We called with many hands pre-flop, expecting to overall lose money for the hand, just less than we would have if we immediately folded to the 3-bet. Because of this, we don't have to defend enough to prevent the 3-better from profitably betting any two cards on some board textures. So this is very similar to a spot where the button opens and the big blind calls, and in that spot, which happens all the time, you're probably very used to the big blind almost always checking, if not literally always checking, then the button betting at a pretty high frequency and the big blind folding often enough that the button can profitably bet any two cards. That makes sense there because the button opens, gives the big blind a really cheap price, so the big blind calls with a weak range, which results in him check folding a lot. It's going to be a similar thing here, where even though we have the advantage of position here, if the small blind 3-bets and we call in the cutoff, for example, his range is going to be quite a lot better than ours. So because of that, there's nothing necessarily wrong if the small blind can profitably bet any two cards in some situations. There's already a lot of money in the pot, and we have the weaker range, so it makes sense that we might fold often enough that our opponent can profitably bet any two cards, but we're still going to defend reasonably aggressively. So now there's some other stuff we should mention because you're not a robot. So if our opponent bet 60% of the pot on the flop, we're getting slightly worse than 3-1 odds. So everyone pretty much knows that, I think, but 60% is a little bit over half the pot, so we're not getting quite 3-1 odds, but slightly worse. We are very regularly calling on the flop despite not being happy with our position because we're getting such a good price. Keep in mind, our really good hands got 4-bet pre-flop, so it's hard for us to be like really happy on the flop unless we flopped a monster, because the hands that we could have had that are like, the really strong hands, they're not in our 3-bet calling range. Yeah, we slow play aces, but for the most part, like our ace king, our kings, our queens, that stuff all got 4-bet pre-flop, so our calling range just isn't that strong. We're not usually very happy with where we're at. Also keep in mind, our opponent's checking range is weaker than his betting range, so we usually dislike seeing a bet. So in general, sometimes you're going to have a really strong hand and want to face a bet. But for the most part, if your opponent's putting more money in the pot, that's not usually a good thing, because that means he thinks he has a profitable hand where he can put money in the pot. You'd much rather see him check and represent the weaker range. So most people, myself included, find it hard getting yourself to do something that will likely have a bad outcome, but is overall a good life decision. So even if we're not thinking poker, an example would be I would hate having to spend 5 hours applying for a job that I think I have a 3% chance of getting. So yeah, just think of a non-poker example real quickly. Even if you know it's a really good decision to apply for a job you're unlikely to get, it sucks to have to spend 5 hours and basically waste a Saturday afternoon applying for a job when you know the outcome's going to likely be bad. So you might force yourself to do it because you know it's a really good life decision, but at the end of the day, it sucks to do something knowing you're probably going to get a bad outcome. Very few people want to do something where they know they're probably going to get a bad outcome. But that leak is absolutely devastating in poker. You have to take high variance but plus EV lines, so you have to make the right decision even though the outcome is probably going to be bad. And we're going to be doing that nonstop in this video. We're going to be calling with hands where, honestly, we're probably going to end up losing more money because we called. But since we are getting such a good price, and since the good outcome is disproportionately good compared to the bad outcome, because we are getting that good price, we're going to end up calling.